Good evening. Stand with me, please, and turn to hymn number 335, Love Lifted Me, all three verses tonight of Love Lifted Me. I was sinking deep in sin, far from the peaceful shore, very deeply stained within, sinking to rise no more. But the master of the sea heard my despairing cry, from the waters lifted me, now saying, am I? Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. All my heart to him I give, ever to him I'll cling. In his blessed presence ever his praises sing. Love so mighty and so true merits my soul's best songs. Faithful serving service due to him belongs. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Souls in danger, look above. Jesus completely saves. He will lift you by his love out of the angry waves. He's the master of the sea, billows his will obey. He, your Savior, wants to be saved today. Love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me, love lifted me, love lifted me, when nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Good singing. You may be seated.
Amen. Well, good evening. Hopefully you're surviving the Seattle heat. We're like Pacific Northwest people, we shrink, or at least most of us do. But it's good. Glad to see you here this evening. And so a couple of announcements. Family camping. It's like not a family camp, but it's family camping. So we have Tallaritas, Buckeyes, Creekmoors, and Buchanan's signed up. So if you wanted to be there and I didn't say your name, you need to come talk to me. And I know some, I'm not calling anybody out, but some don't like camping, and that's totally cool. I mean, you know, if you don't like God's creation and wonder, no, I'm totally kidding. Yeah, sleeping on the ground is not for everyone. And so that's no problem. But if you love camping, wow, what a great opportunity. So we'll be at the Cougar Rock Campground there in Mount Rainier. And there'll be opportunities if you want to hike, you can go hike. If you just want to chill, you can do that. And so there'll be all kinds of stuff as we go there with Foundation Baptist Church. And then just a reminder, so the 23rd Moses Lake Youth Rally and the Tallaritas are going to be going. And so if you are in, and by that I mean like taking our youth, I'm sure they'll have a good time too. But so if you are a teenager, you know a teenager, it's a great youth rally. Brother Kurt Skelly is preaching, great preacher. And so encourage everybody to go to that. It will be good. And 17th of August, game night. So those are, we didn't do bulletins today. It doesn't matter because I don't think people actually do anything with the bulletins. They'll be like, well, Pastor, we've got something coming up. Yes, we do. So those are the events that are coming up. And again, it's good to be here. I wanted to open up tonight with just some testimonies of God's blessing. And so I will start. It's once again, it's good to be back in civilization and hot showers and everything else, and camping, and just thankful for God's protection for me and Abby and Anna as we hiked, and we ended up hiking 48 miles there in kind of the northern part of the state and the Pasayten wilderness. And it was a blessing to be able to spend time with my girls. And they were awesome. They did well. I think youngest people we saw on the trail. And so it was just wonderful to be able to spend. It's kind of sad, but there aren't many opportunities, honestly, as a parent, that you get for 6 days nonstop to be able to spend with your kids. And so that was a blessing, and they were a blessing to me, and I want to praise God for that. So anybody else have a blessing you want to share? Brother Jeff.
Mrs. Buck and I were praying for a really long time that we could go to Bible college, and he's going to come.
Amen. So
That's an answered prayer. That's
Isn't it?
my testimony.
that's an answered prayer. As he's giving me the side eye, I think. Yeah. So Luke is going to go for I believe a semester to West Coast, right? I'm not saying anything out of turn, right? And so yeah, that was wonderful. So last minute when your pastor's out hiking in the Pasayten wilderness and he has to figure out how to get a pastoral reference and everything, but he got it done, so it was good. Good job. He's resourceful. So that's a blessing. Who else has a blessing? Brother Larry.
Well, it was a blessing to have the Buckeyes show up at camping this
Amen.
and out of that came a discussion with my nephew about how we met and what our church was about and kind of his experience with megachurch and he didn't really like that. And so anyway, it's an opportunity. I invited them to come.
Amen.
And so I'm just thankful because Jeff Sonata's testimony and just being there was an impetus for that.
Yeah. Oh, praise the Lord.
Appreciate it.
That is a blessing. Amen. Christelle.
So I'm really glad to have my husband and girls back. I've decided I'm not really well suited to not having him around. I really miss him and my girls. So glad that they're home safe and that they had a good time. But I really enjoyed my time with my boys. It was just like Joel spending time with the girls. I had my boys a lot of the time and we got to do stuff together, and that was a blessing, and especially as they're growing older now and deciding what they're going to do. And ours, going to college far away, so it's not home a whole lot. So to get that time with them was real special to me. And I got to go to a movie with them, and they wanted me to sit in between them. So it was real special to me.
Amen. Amen. Anybody else? Yeah, Brother Johnny.
I am just so grateful for my wife. She's amazing and puts up with me so much. And she's just so amazing, and I don't deserve her. Before we were married, I was very much thinking like, oh man, I'm going to be in big trouble. And then she came along, and she's just so much better than I ever expected God to be.
Amen. Amen. Brother Nick.
It was just a blessing to me this week that because I wasn't able to go to camping because of circumstances, my manager literally did everything she ever did for me to be able to go to this
Oh.
rally, and I'm possibly getting paid for that. So
Hey.
she's just working as much as she can to just help me out. She really does have a heart for what I'm doing. So it's just a blessing to have a manager like that.
That is a blessing when you can get potentially paid, right, to go do ministry work. Yeah, amen. Praise the Lord. Anybody else have a blessing that they'd like to share? Yes, Miss Kitty.
Totally shocked, but we got our well done.
Hey.
And it was 300 feet, which is not shallow, but
Yeah.
it's not 600 feet. And it takes 8 gallons a minute. And that's not 30, but it's 8. It's way more than 3. So we are very blessed to have that done.
Good. Amen. Amen. They're faster, but anyways, but we're happy for you.
God could put a real big roadblock,
I'm not praying for that. Yeah.
That would be a big one.
Miss Lori.
After a week on cruise with Johnny, my next week after that was really sparse. And within like a couple days, I had 5 conclusions and then the leave. And one of them is actually already emailed me and said that she's better. And then I've got a couple other patients that I'm working on, and 3 of which are also better. So
Amen.
yeah, so I'm seeing both sides. Like, all of a sudden, I have no idea, like, family dinner or whatever. And, yeah.
Amen. That is good. Anybody else want to share a blessing that, yeah, Miss Aaliyah? Yeah, amen. Nick's birthday, 27? 27. Yeah, it's like a baby. Yes, all right. Anything else? Anybody else don't want to? It's good to praise God for his blessings. Amen? Remind us where they come from, right? Kind of like we heard this morning from Brother Nick. And that God is the author, right, of everything. And I understand the point that Nick made, right, about what James was driving for. But the truth stands. God is the author of everything good that we have. Everything good that we have. And so many times it's easy for us to forget that and just kind of take it as, oh, it's just good circumstances. Or even worse, maybe it's something that we did, right? But God's, yes, Christelle.
It's just funny how things get orchestrated. That was exactly what our junior church lesson was about today,
Amen.
about the farmer who tore down his he was in a church
Barns,
who tore
yep.
down his barns because he forgot to thank God for everything and he just took all the credit. And then God came and took him away and said, okay, you're done. And the whole point of that was that all the good things come from God. It's just funny that like,
Amen.
that those in the same thing. So it's nice for you to be saying that. Yeah, it's heard that this morning as well.
Yeah, right, kids? You heard that. They all look at me like, what? Yeah. And I am thankful that we have Brother AJ Lutrick here, our church planter to West Seattle. And I forgot he was here. He was here Wednesday night. I wasn't here, but he's preaching tonight, and so for that I am thankful. And just I am we were blessed in the fact that we had my family, we had the Buckeyes, and Brother Johnny and his kids basically come and help start this church. And Brother AJ, although he's got folks, as we did, from Woodin Valley and from Foundation, I mean, I think he has it tougher in the fact that he's a one-man show. And again, there are people there that are helping and blessing in that way, and I'm sure he is very, very thankful for that. But he's there in West Seattle and putting a stake in the ground and, needs prayer. And so very, very grateful for him. Thankful that he was able to come here before he starts an evening service there in West Seattle. And so looking forward to hear from him. But before we do, why don't we go to another song?
Stand with me again and turn to page hymn number that is 398. My Jesus, I love thee. All 4 verses of My Jesus, I love thee. My Jesus, I love thee. I know thou art mine. For thee all the folly of sin I resign. My gracious Redeemer, adore thee in heaven so bright. I'll sing with the glittering crown on my brow. If ever I love thee, my Jesus, 'tis now. Good singing. You may be seated.
Amen. We'll go ahead and get ready for our offering. If you didn't have a chance to give this morning, give you an opportunity to do that now. And let's go ahead and go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we do thank you so much for just the opportunity to be in your house. We thank you for the opportunity to worship you on your day, Lord, the resurrection day. And I know there is one day a year where we memorialize that as Resurrection Sunday, but Lord, every day, every Sunday is just a celebration of your resurrection and the life that you give. And we're so thankful for that, Lord. Pray for just this offering, that you would bless it as we think about our missionaries that we support. And Lord, like Brother AJ, and just so thankful for them. Lord, we pray that you would help them, Lord, as we contribute to that, and that you would help the gospel go everywhere across the world, Lord, and New Testament Baptist churches would be started, and that people would hear the gospel and people would get saved, Lord, and that would continue. We know it will. We know it will until you return, Lord, but I pray that we would have a hand in it through our financial offerings, as well as just our obedience locally. Lord, we thank you for that and just the opportunity. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Stand one last time and sing hymn number 505, Have Thine Own Way, Lord. We'll sing all 4 verses of Have Thine Own Way, Lord. Have thine own way, Lord. Have thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the
As we were singing, actually, as I was listening to the offertory and then starting to sing, I was just impressed about the fact that, man, I am thankful for our piano players. And having Brother AJ here, where typically before, if he were here, man, he'd be playing, or he'd be listening to himself recorded, right, playing. And I just want to say, man, the piano playing, right, whether it's offertory or congregational, has just been a huge, huge blessing. So thank you. And to everybody who has been working so diligently to use those gifts for the Lord. And it is a blessing. With that, I want to invite Brother AJ up, and just, again, thankful for you, Brother AJ. We are blessed to be able to have you as one of our missionaries, and just to be able to be a partaker of you with the work there in West Seattle, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Amen. Well, good evening. It's good to be back in Bellevue. I was just here Wednesday, like Pastor just said, but it's always good to be back. It's always good to be back. And I'm not going to echo everything you just said, but I was thinking the same thing as far as seeing a church growing and maturing. And one of the things that comes with that is people. A church is people. So people growing and maturing and giving their talents to the Lord. I was trying to think back, and a couple of years ago, this time last year, I guess, Tati was still in school. Not in August, but about that time. And then Leah hadn't even come out yet, so the two main pianists were not even here. But the Lord knows how to build His church, and that's exciting. It's a blessing. And let me tell you, from now church planners' perspective, which that's interesting. I don't think I've preached here since we've started. But from that perspective, to have anybody be able to play is huge. Is huge. So I wanted to give you just a very quick, Emerald City's familiar with this now, a drive-by testimony. You grew up in the south part of Dallas, yeah. A drive-by testimony. So Emerald City Baptist Church has just been blessed. Let me tell you, we had our 17th service today, and as far as people coming and being willing to serve and get plugged in, every single week we've had people, whether from Woodland Valley or from Foundation, people all the way down in Centralia, come up and just be willing to be used however, wherever they can be used. And that's a blessing. That is encouraging. And we've had one couple now come from the area. We've had several visitors, I should say. We've had several visitors from surrounding areas. I've shared my testimony about Alan, a man I met through the bank, and a man who needs to be saved. Came on Easter Sunday. That was a huge deal. That was a huge deal for him. But I knew him through the bank, and he's not exactly in our neighborhood. We've had people all the way up from Everett, people from different areas, but we finally had a couple, and you might already know this, but we've had a couple from West Seattle come in, and this was several weeks ago now. They've come 5 times, and so that's just huge. And of course, just talking to them and getting some feedback. So how did you hear about us? And found out that they got a door hanger on their door. And knowing their address, I was able to go back, and I keep records of everything. It's one of my curses. But keeping records, I went back and I saw, okay, when did we door knock that area? And I figured out it was the day that Bellevue Baptist came and helped us. And not just that, but the particular street that they live on, I was like, okay, who did that street? It was either the Buchanans or the Allards. It was one of those two, and they live right in the middle. So I gave you to that street. So I don't know who exactly will get credit in heaven. But I just thought that was so neat. And think of it this way. Those two families are here because we started a church in Bellevue. You probably wouldn't have been out there door knocking with us if Bellevue Baptist hadn't existed. So it's just so neat to see how the Lord is blessing and giving fruit. And a couple weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago now, I was there in their home, and we were just fellowshipping, celebrating what the Lord is doing. So it's exciting. It is exciting just to be a part. Just to be a part. And if the next 17 weeks go by as fast as this one, we're going to be coming up on our 1-year anniversary in a blink of an eye. It is just crazy. So I invite you to keep praying for us whenever you think about it. I tried putting something on Facebook, but even I thought it was too cheesy about every time you're waiting for a green light, pray for Emerald City. But so I won't post it publicly, but I'll tell you So if you're waiting for a green light, there you go. Yes. Well, your pastor asked me to preach a while back. He was planning, and I wasn't sure he was even going to be here today. So we've been planning this for a while, and we're going to be in the book of Luke tonight. So if you have your Bibles, Luke chapter number 2. And I understand, I realize Bellevue Baptist just finished a series in Luke not too long ago. I know that. But I found a new truth. I'm kidding. If anybody ever stands up here and says that, you better watch out. No, nothing new. But it's Luke chapter number 2. So it's been a while since you've been there. And I'm just particularly burdened about this passage. We just preached it not today, but last week there at Emerald City. And it's exactly where we're at as a church. And so the Lord just gave liberty to preach that tonight. And it's a unique context here in the book of Luke where Jesus is at. The series that we're preaching, we've titled Christ the Savior. Christ the Savior. And eventually Acts is going to follow that, so it's going to be the Savior to all people. So it's a big work in progress. But for right now, Luke the Savior. And this was our 8th sermon this morning, and Jesus is barely on the scene yet. It's a lot of preliminary work, explaining and laying the foundation, but that's where we were at. So if you have Luke chapter number 2, go ahead and stand with me. We're going to begin reading in verse number 39. Verse number 39. And when they had performed all things according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee to their own city Nazareth, and the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Talking about Jesus. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover, and when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. And when they had fulfilled the days, as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew not of it. But they, supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinsfolk and acquaintance. And when they had found him not, they turned back again to Jerusalem, seeking him. And it came to pass that after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. Well, he was 12 years old. Of course it would be astonishing. Verse 48, and when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said unto him, Son, why hast thou thus dealt with us? Behold, thy father and I have sought thee, sorrowing. And he said unto them, this is the first recorded words of Jesus here in Luke, How is it that ye sought me? Wished ye not that I must be about my Father's business? And they understood not the saying which he spake unto them. And he went down with them, and came to Nazareth, and was subject unto them, but his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. In favor with God and man. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I am just encouraged and humbled, Lord, to be here at Bellevue Baptist Church tonight, Father. And you know how in my own heart, even in the course of the songs, the hymns that were chosen, Lord, the way you're at work in my own life personally, and the life of Emerald City Baptist Church, and the life of Foundation Baptist Church and Bellevue Baptist Church. Father, you never change. You're a consistent God. But more and more, as we're in your word, as we grow to fellowship with you, Lord, it becomes so much more evident how involved and how interested you are in what's going on here. Father, I pray that tonight, as your word is opened, that you would give liberty. Father, please remove us from distraction and help me to convey what this text is saying without any hindrance. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. 3 years ago, about 3 years ago, I had the privilege of teaching 9th grade at Woodin Valley Baptist School. It's hard to believe that was 3 years ago now, and people in this very room would think about Wade and about Lucas. Literally just not last month, the month before, graduated from high school. They graduated. I didn't mess them up that bad. I was able to teach, and it was a unique year, I think, for the school, in that it was one of the few years where they only had one class for a teacher, meaning grade. So usually it's 9th, 10th, and 11th or something like that. But that year it was just 9th grade with me as the fresh out of college, wet behind the ears, however the statement goes, teacher at Woodin Valley. And let me tell you, it was one of the most, to this day, one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. I was able to teach by the course of just high school and how it works, many subjects. One of the subjects that we taught was biology. Now, I did not go to college to be a biology teacher, a biology professor. That wasn't in my plans, wasn't on the horizon. I didn't study that very much. But over the course of the year, because I've always had an interest in it myself, I think every boy wants to go out and study animals and life and how things work. It was a unique opportunity. I took that as a chance myself to study and to grow in biology as part of my job. We also listened to a lot of David Attenborough on planet Earth because, well, if David Attenborough is talking, it just sounds smart. So we listened to a lot of that in class. But biology, as we studied as a class, as I taught them as the 9th graders, is the study of life. Biology is the study of life, of living things. There's a lot of variety. If you look at the world that God created, if you look at the world that we were placed in, your pastor mentioned being out in creation and God's creation. You don't have to be there for more than 5 seconds before you start to see really quick, there's variety everywhere. Everything from a bumblebee to a rhinoceros, from a hummingbird to a hippo. I mean, stuff in creation just abounds with variety. And so the study of it naturally is a very, very interesting, very engaging topic. Very engaging. But one of the things that you study real quick, if you take a biology class or if you take a course on that, is that there is a difference between something that is living and something that is inanimate. An inanimate object, something that has no life to it. And you would think, okay, well, Brother AJ, this is pretty self-explanatory. If it's dead or if it's alive, if it's not living or if it's a living thing. But science has attempted to give some hardcore definitions, hardcore requirements for something to be considered alive. If we were to look at this plant right up here at the front, what separates that from a plant that is actually living? And we have a huge, it's disproportionately huge, but it's a blessing, huge flower pot at Emerald City Baptist Church full of flowers, and they're beautiful, but they're not real. They're not alive. So, if you were to boil it down, what separates something that's alive from something that is not inanimate? Science has defined that. So listen, as I give you a couple of the requirements in order to be alive. Number one, growth. Growth. Increase in the number and size of cells. In order for something to be alive, there has to, at some point in its life, be growth. Also this, lifespan, development, different developmental stages. I mean, one of the best examples of that is a frog going from an egg to a tadpole, and if there's anything else in between that and a frog. Anyway, you've seen the charts. Between the egg and the frog, there's developmental stages, right? Or you look at a butterfly. It doesn't come out a butterfly from the egg. There's development. Well, that's one of the characteristics of being alive, developmental stages. Also this, reproduction. In order for a species, in order for something to be considered living, it has to be able to reproduce itself of the same kind, to grow in number and survive. Also this, heredity, passing down of traits or characteristics from parents to offspring. Offspring looking like their parents. Also movement, use of body parts and doing activities. And you say, okay, well, that's where you got busted because plants don't move. Well, they do, actually. If you ever see a tree in nature that has kind of a weird slant to it while it was seeking sunlight, there's movement. It's part of a characteristic of being alive. Also response. Response is reaction of an organism caused by stimuli. So in order for something to be alive, it has to meet the qualifications. And I didn't make this up. This is science. This is biology 101. But if you're listening, if you're tuned in at all here, you know this is not a biology class. And as I'm giving this list, you say, okay, I know where he's going with this. And you're right, I'm not tricking you. This is a perfect example of church planting. I mean, think about it. In order for a church, and listen, a church is a body. A church is an organism. It is a living organism. But in order for a church to be alive, it has to meet the same qualifications itself. Let's go back over this real quick. Growth. In order for a church to be alive, it has to be growing. Also, lifespan, development, different stages. Oh my goodness. Thinking back just a couple years ago at the very beginning of Bellevue Baptist Church and getting to witness that, getting to see from the walking into this building for the first time and seeing this loft that was over here, and these walls did not look the same. And there's people here that today that we did not know their names 3 years ago. There's different developmental stages, even in the life of a church. And let me tell you, Emerald City Baptist Church, that's what we're feeling right now. Things change. Things grow. Reproduction. Looking like your parents. I told the people there at Emerald City, people that haven't been to Foundation, I'm saying, you know why we do certain things? It's not necessarily required in the Bible, but we look like our parents. We look like the church that started us. Foundation Baptist Church was the first church I'd ever been a part of that had a time of worship before the preaching. And guess what? As our parent, as the one who started us, we go out and we look like them. People ought to walk into Bellevue Baptist Church and say, hey, this is similar to a church I know of in Sammamish. Why? Because that's your parents. Heredity. Same thing's true for Emerald City. It's something looking the same. Movement. Not sitting still. Not getting stagnant. Not being content. But being about moving. Being about the Lord's work. And finally, a response. Reacting to different things that happen. Because you realize as soon as you start being involved with any work of the Lord, anything that the God is doing, there's going to be attacks from every single side. We're in a battle. We're in a spiritual warfare. And there ought to be a response to that. There ought to be a response. So if a church is living, if a church is a living organism, these are the characteristics that it shows. And if you picked up at all on what we read this evening in the text, if there was one characteristic that seems to be highlighted and kind of leap off the page, I would say this: growth. If the gospel were a play, if the book of Luke was a movie, let's say, and you know how in the movies, whenever something significant happens and then the screen goes black and then you see the words pop up, 5 years later. That's basically exactly what happened right here in the book of Luke. So Luke has been showing the birth of Christ and the foundation of Christ's life. And he does that so much more in depth than any other gospel writer, any other writer of the New Testament. He lays this foundation, and it's long. It took us a while to get through it at Emerald City, all the way up till the end of chapter number 2. And then after Jesus is a baby, and they take him into the temple, and they basically give their baby to God. It was a customary thing for the firstborn to be given to God, but a lot of details there. At the very end of that, the screen goes black, and it fades out, and it says, now 12 years later. 12 years later. This account is a high point in Luke. It's the first time Jesus speaks. In addition to that, it's tied together from the very beginning. But if you noticed as we were reading it, there's a note of perplexity. There's a note of slight confusion in the text as Mary and Joseph get confused. Well, let's go through this. Look back at verse number 41. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the Feast of the Tabernacle, So back in Jesus' day, it was customary, in fact, it was required for men to go back to Jerusalem for certain feasts. there was 3 feasts in particular that the nation of Israel was all about. You have Passover, you have Pentecost, and you have the Feast of Tabernacles. All feasts that if you were a Jew, if you were a Jew who was serious about God at all, then you were going to make your way back to Jerusalem for these feasts. But interestingly enough, one thing that you start to find as you study out history is that the family was not required to go. This was required for men. So Joseph was required to go back. The family, however, was not. So it's pretty interesting that as soon as Luke starts to recount this, he says in verse number 41, now his parents went to Jerusalem. So basically what this is showing is that Mary and Joseph, they were in a routine. They were in a mode of life that they weren't just nominal Jews. They weren't just Jews in name only, because for the entire family to go was commitment. It was a big deal. We're talking about an 80-mile trip. Pastor Joel, everything that you just did with your daughters, that was about 50 years, might have felt like 50 years, 50 miles. Add about 30 miles to that. That was the trek that they made every single year to Jerusalem. And they did it with young ones. They did it with their wives and their families. They would travel in caravans. So what they did, what Mary and Joseph did, was they went, and as they went to Jerusalem, in verse number 42, when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. Now here's something really interesting. In Jewish society, it was normal and it was expected to teach a 12-year-old about commitment, to teach a 12-year-old about oaths, about celebrating these feasts, but they were not required, they couldn't of themselves be committed yet. They were too young. They were too young. So Jesus, as a 12-year-old boy, is, in the eyes of society, not expected to be all in with this. Not expected at all. But verse 43 says, and when they had fulfilled the days, as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew not of it. I won't ask for a show of hands, but who in here, just answer yourself, has left a kid somewhere? We could go after story, I'm sure, about leaving the kid, and sorry, it's usually the youngest. I don't know what it is about the youngest being left behind, probably because by that point the parents are tired, but I know in my own family, I was the first of 4 children. My parents, they were married, and for 7 years they didn't have any kids. They started to just assume God doesn't want us to have kids. And then they had 4. Boom, 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 boom. That's just how it works. So me, as the oldest, did not get put down anywhere. And I'm not a clinger. I'm not one of those babies that clung to mama. The second I was put in the nursery, I didn't notice she was gone. It broke my mother's heart. My brother, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. Mama's boy. Brother. Which makes sense if you look at the big picture now. I'm in Seattle. He lives on the same property they do, different house. Things don't change that much. But my brother, I will give it to him. He was, not so much now, but he was the cutest kid. The cutest kid. You look at pictures of him, and he was just that adorable boy. I don't know how that happened, but Colton is my brother. We went to Missouri once to visit my mom's family. And in the process of doing things, I don't know how it all worked out. I was about 5, so it would have made him about 3 years old. We took a train. We took one of those trolleys in the city to go and to tour different places. And I'll never forget, even though I was so young, this memory is burned in my mind, how we got out as a family, and there's a bunch of people, that get on these trains. And as we got off the train, the doors shut, and these big glass doors. I'm with my mom, with my dad, and we turn around, and my 3-year-old brother has his hand on the window on the other side of the glass. And he had this look on his face of, "You abandoned me." As a 5-year-old brother, I was heartbroken. That didn't happen. And my mom, oh my goodness, the second she turned around and saw it, and all you moms in here, you know that, actually, you can't describe that adrenaline. She probably could have jumped out in front of the train at that point and stopped it. I'm not kidding, but you know that surge of energy. I never saw my mom respond like this. Very calm-tempered woman. She started beating on that glass and getting the conductor's attention, and she stopped the entire train because her baby was on the other side. Wasn't going to leave that baby behind. By the time you get to Katie, number 4, we would get to the restaurant and be ordering, like, where's Katie? Oh, she's at church. Oh, well, we'll get her to go back. That's how it works. That's how it works. Well, Jesus, so as Mary and Joseph, think about this. Mary and Joseph, he is the oldest. He is the firstborn. They traveled for a whole day. That's what the Bible says. They traveled for a whole day. And they didn't realize Jesus wasn't with them. In fact, the text says they assumed that they were with their kinsfolk, with their family. You know, they were traveling huge caravans, big groups of people. Why? Because there was nomads in the land. There was people that would go out and they expected these very well-traveled roads to have people that were going to have sacrifices. So they traveled together for safety. And so it was totally normal. It was common for somebody to leave their specific family and just travel with your cousins. It was like an annual thing. But at the end of the day, Mary and Joseph went around and they looked for Jesus. Jesus is not there. Jesus is not there. And so for the next couple of verses, what Luke shows is they went back to Jerusalem. But listen, they didn't just go back to Jerusalem. There is a feeling, there is a intensity in the passage of they went back in a fury, in a frenzy. We lost our son. We lost our son. And I've heard sermons. You might have heard sermons. You might someday hear sermons from a preacher that says, well, if you lose Jesus, go back to where you found him. And I get it. But that's not really what Luke is getting across. Because Mary and Joseph weren't flippant and this, oh, well, we stopped fellowshipping with Jesus. Remember, they're going out as a family. This is not something they were required to do, but they were humble. They loved God. This entire series, we've been seeing how Mary and Joseph were responding correctly to God. So there was not a heart issue here. There wasn't this issue of they forsook Jesus and now they had to go back and find him. That's not how God works. That's not how God works. What happened was literally they left and Jesus wasn't with them. And when they went, Mary, who was 100% human, went into mama mode. And then it says they got to Jerusalem. And let's see, what verse is this? Look at verse number 44. But they, supposing him, went to their kinsfolk. Verse 45. And when they found him not, they turned back again to Jerusalem, seeking him. And it came to pass that after 3 days, 3 days. So that wasn't from the point that they found out that he was missing. They got back to Jerusalem. And then, while they were in Jerusalem for 3 days, they went about seeking Jesus. Where are you? So it's no surprise. At the next verse, it shows that Jesus was sitting in the temple with the doctors, with the teachers. And just a quick note of reference, that was a common thing. It was a common thing for doctors, for the instructors of the law to be sitting with their students. That was a normal practice. But what was very unique about this was they were sitting and they were listening to Jesus ask questions. They were listening to him talk. And as they talked and as they communed, the Bible says that they were amazed. They were amazed. How does this 12-year-old boy, who's not a man by any stretch of the imagination, how is this 12-year-old boy asking such questions, having such dialogue? And I think it's verse 45, 46, it says they were amazed. They were amazed. I thought this was really interesting. One commentator pointed out that in that day and time, there was many people who said that as they sat and talked, people were amazed. It was always autobiographical, meaning they were saying it about themselves. Okay, so it's not that impressive, but what Luke was showing was they looked at Jesus and said he was impressive. Impressive. Mary was not impressed. Mary went in, and I don't know, has anybody in here seen Gone with the Wind? Okay, a long time ago. It's an old movie. But there's a character in Gone with the Wind named Mammy. Mammy's intense, and that's how I imagine Mary talking. I'm not being disrespectful. Mary is a woman. But as Mary went in, she's like, boy, what is wrong with you? Knowest thou not that your father and I have been seeking you sorrowing? You hear that word, sorrowing? That means it was an agony of spirit. Her heart was being ripped out of her chest. She was saying, son, what is the matter with you? We have been looking for you like crazy. Like crazy. Look at Jesus' response. At first, It sounds weird. He said, verse 49, how is it that ye sought me? He's saying, Mom, why were you looking for me? Now, if you're thinking like me, I mean, maybe if you're far more mature than I am, you never thought this, but me, I'm thinking, is that fair? They didn't know where you were, Jesus. But he's saying, hey, why did you look for me? The next word is wist. Understand is, do you not know that I must be about my Father's business? My Father's business? That word must is very intentional. It's dia. It means that it's a bound. It's a word that shows it's of the utmost importance that I must be about my Father's business. See, what Jesus was doing here at this very moment was he wasn't just asking questions. He obviously was not being a smart aleck. He obviously wasn't just playing with his mom who just went through an intense moment. What he's doing is this. He's showing, listen, Mary, Mom, I am about my Father's business. There is a mission, there is a reason I am here, and that is what I am all about. What I am all about. This was an important moment. Not for Jesus so much as it was for Mary and for Joseph. A moment where the people of Emerald City had the privilege of going through the text leading all the way up to this. How, listen, Mary and Joseph's life were changed in a blink of a moment. Think about it. What would it be like to be going about your regular day routine? I preached this at Woodland Valley. How Mary was a young maiden who was surrendered to God. She had a good attitude, a good spirit, and she was betrothed to be married, meaning she was, somewhere between 15, 18 years old, somewhere in there. She's engaged. Her life is moving forward in a good way, and then all of a sudden somebody comes up, the angel Gabriel, and says, hey, Mary, plans have changed. You're going to have a baby. So listen, her life, even though she was blessed, and even though it talks about that, how generations are going to call her blessed, and it's true, we're talking about her tonight, so the Bible was true. Generations will call her blessed. She had such a huge part in God's redemptive plan. But listen, her own personal story, her own development changed. And her life at that point was flipped upside down. From that, all the way to, you fast forward 9 months later, they're traveling in a situation where God worked out for them to be taxed, for them to have to go and to basically, it was like a census, to go to Joseph's hometown of Bethlehem, and there, under those circumstances, in a stall, laying her baby in a manger. Mary's life was not what she probably imagined it would be as a 10, 11, 12-year-old girl. So Mary's life, Mary and Joseph's life, Luke has been emphasizing that all the way through, from chapter number 1 all the way through chapter number 2. But what he's showing is it didn't happen all at once. Because look at the next verse. The next verse says, verse 50, and they understood not the saying which he spake unto them. Which he spake unto them. Sometimes, in the process of following God, you start to lose sight of the fact that God is in the business of change. God is in the business of growth. And we said at the beginning of the message, basically this entire text, if there's one word that kind of is highlighted, one word that kind of is, we could say it this way, the scarlet thread that goes all the way through the passage is this. There is growth that is happening. It's emphasized with Jesus. You go all the way back to verse number 39, or 40, talking about Jesus grew. And at the end of the passage, verse number 52, Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God. Listen, Jesus, as God's Son, was growing and developing, but Jesus wasn't the only character here. Mary and Joseph were going through a moment, they were going through an intense lesson right here of growth and of change. And to this point of understanding what their son was about. And you'll find this, Bellevue Baptist Church, as you move forward serving God, change is going to come. change and growth is going to happen. So there's a couple of principles. There's three principles of growth that I'd like to show you that we just read. Number one, change or growth will come. It will come in the middle of faithfully obeying Him. So in verse 41, remember, look back at it with me. Verse 41, now his parents went to Jerusalem every year. Every year. They were consistent. They were, and again, remember, this wasn't required. They were in an attitude of being sold out, of being surrendered, of being all on board as a family for God, and consistently, every single year, they went. But this year, something happened. Change. Growth. And listen, Bellevue, as you're serving God consistently, as you're sold out to Him consistently, change will happen. It will. But you know why that's maybe kind of scary? Because we like consistency. We like things to kind of be the same. We like to know what to expect, right? I mean, okay, thinking about Emerald City Baptist Church, you could have told me all day long what to expect. You still never know what to expect. The first Sunday showing up, even that week before, printing the order of service. I don't know why it never occurred to me. Church planners have to have an order of service. I was like, oh yeah, they don't just exist. We have to make this stuff. And so I literally sat down and thought about, okay, so how is this going to work? And then the week after that, I'm like, okay, what needs to change? And you know what I started to think to myself? I can't wait till we get to a point where we can just be consistent. Just, show up and change the hymn numbers and you have a consistency about you. Listen, we like consistency. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with consistency. In fact, this isn't the point of this message, but there's something to be said about a life that's stable, about a life that whenever surrendered to God, I mean, Proverbs talks about that. How you're going to give God your finances, well, then they'll be stable. They'll be stable. There's a definite element to that. But listen, as you're serving God and things start to become consistent, don't get rigid. Don't get stuck in the way of, hey, whoa, this is how we do things. This is how we've always done things. Because you know how when change comes, it's whenever people are consistently, faithfully serving God. Serving God. As soon as things get comfortable, transactions happen. I remember my dad. I have a fantastic relationship with my dad. I love him. Just this week, I got a text from him, which is a miracle in itself. My dad sent a text. I never thought I'd say the words. My dad sent me a text. You know all it said? Proud of you, love you, praying for you. I mean, that's all it takes. That's all it takes. I have a phenomenal relationship with my dad. Always have. Always have. Whenever he took me up to Heartland, I don't know why, this is just on my mind, thinking about Yarnard, thinking about Lucas, about to go down to West Coast. You start to feel it as things get closer. And my mom has never been the emotional one. My mom, love her, she is a godly woman. I've seen her cry once my entire life. Dad, I see him cry almost every single time I see him. That's just, he's an emotional guy. That's okay. That's okay. Whenever he took me up to Heartland, at that point, it was only a 3.5-hour drive. Now I'm thinking, man, it's a 5-hour flight to get home. At that point, 3.5-hour drive, but it felt like the world. The world. And so we took me up there, and I remember it was Sunday at Heartland Sunday. So in the morning, they dropped me off. They were going to leave. So I'm standing there in the parking lot at Art Wilson, just a wreck, a complete wreck. I'm leaving my dad, my brother, my mom. Mom was just like, you got a toothbrush? Okay, see you at Christmas. But Dad, oh my goodness, we prayed there in the dorm and he just started weeping. I'm like, oh, it was good. But then as he started driving away and the car got smaller, I mean, it was really starting to hit home. He turned the car around and came all the way back. He pulled around and rolled down the window and he said, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, Dad, you got to go. You got to go. That's the kind of relationship I have with my dad. But you know what he told me right before I went to college? He said, you were just getting to the point where I was starting to like you. I mean, he always loved me, but he said, I was just starting to like you. You know what it means? As soon as, and I see that. I see that in our relationship. I was a teenager. I had moments, and this is not necessarily a teenage thing. It was just something that I went through as a teenager where I stepped away and had moments of bitterness and frustration with my dad, with people all in my life. But I got to the point where we had such a good bonding experience, such a good growth, and right at that point, things changed. Things changed. But that can happen. That can happen. Listen, Bellevue, as you're following the Lord, as you're serving Him faithfully, consistently, I mean, you're coming up on your 3rd anniversary. That's huge. That's a blessing. That's a testimony of how God's worked here. But as you get to that point, listen, you know what the tendency in us is to do? It starts to say, all right, I'm comfortable. I like it. Let's keep things here. But God might come in and bring change. God might come in and bring growth. Bring growth. That's not just true for a church, though. It's true for individuals. It's true for families. As you're serving God, an indication that you're healthy is that there will be change, that there will be growth. You can't get to a place of being stagnant. Cannot get to a place of being stagnant. Number 2, look at verse number 50. They understood not the saying which he spake unto them. Change, growth will not always make sense. It won't always make sense. I know, well, I can give tons of personal examples of how, as a 12-year-old boy, looking forward and saying, I think God has a plan for my life, and then it's inevitable. You start to kind of make that plan and picture this is what God's going to do. Listen, sometimes in the course of serving God and following Him and growth happening, sometimes growth happens that doesn't make sense. Listen, it wasn't in the plans. It wasn't in the agenda. It wasn't in the, okay, I'm gonna step out and then build a family. We're gonna get this house. Sometimes change does not make sense. You know what I'm really encouraged by? Mary's testimony. Mary's testimony. Because as much as I have heard from the Lord through preaching my entire life, she saw the angel of God. She saw Gabriel come to her and say, Mary, listen, you are going to have a son, and he is going to redeem mankind back to the Father. Mind blown. She said, how shall this be? I've never known a man. You know what the angel's response was? What Gabriel said? He said, hey, for with God nothing shall be impossible. Nothing shall be impossible. So, in my mind, I'm thinking, Mary, you saw something that's never happened in the course of human history. She had a baby in a situation that was impossible, but God worked. And you know what her testimony was back at the beginning, or in the middle of chapter number 2, was that the shepherds, listen, she's carried this baby for 9 months. You cannot begin to think that it has not been on her mind for a single moment. Constantly, over and over and over, she's chewing on this. What is God doing? How is this possible? Why is God at work in my life? She's been chewing on this and chewing on this. And then, once she has Jesus, the shepherds show up and say, wow, the Savior. And you know what her response was? She took all this in, and she chewed on it more. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. She took it in and she pondered it in her heart. She pondered it in her heart. So Mary's seen it all until 12 years later. 12 years later, now she goes to her son in the temple and says, son, what are you thinking? We've been looking for you. And Jesus said, hey, I have to be about my Father's business. Mary still had growth to do. Mary still had understanding that God was, growing in her. And it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense right away. The disciples are going to go through the same thing. Jesus is going to tell them point blank who he is, what's going to happen. He told, it was not a surprise. He said, hey, listen, I'm going to go and I'm going to die in Jerusalem. And on 3 days, I'm going to rise again. But they were still surprised. They were still amazed. Listen, it doesn't always sink in right away. And listen, as you're going forward as a church, as you're going forward as a family, as you're going forward as an individual who says, listen, God, I know you, I love you, I give my life to you, sometimes change is going to come in, growth is going to happen that you're not going to understand right away. Right away. So in verse number 51, it says, he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject unto them, but his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. In her heart. I pointed this out to Emerald City. Like, whenever God's changing and doing a work in your life, you know what I don't recommend? Going to people to hear what you want to hear. Going to people to hear that, oh, honey, this is what God's doing. Honey, you're a victim. Honey, this isn't fair. Listen, what Mary did was she took what Jesus said. She took it at face value, but though it didn't make sense, she kept it in her heart. Listen, God was doing a work in Mary. God was doing a work in Mary, who was the mother of Jesus, to say, hey, listen, everything that's going on here, your entire family, it's not just surface level. There is a business that is much bigger than you. There's a business that is much bigger than your individual family unit. It's the Father's business. And Mary had to grow into that. Mary had to grow. Whenever God brings change and growth that doesn't make sense, I would do this. Take time to reflect. Take time to reflect. Don't go straight to Facebook. Don't go straight to having to vent frustration, having to vent, listen, I don't know why this happened in my life. If God's doing something, if God is changing and growing you, it might be wise to step aside. I mean, physically, step aside. I told teenagers this at camp. You're at a church camp. You're surrounded with 200 plus people. But listen, there's always a place to go. I found this in college. There's always a place to go, to step away, be alone with God. Because whenever stuff starts to happen that you don't understand, that you don't seem to comprehend and say, this was not part of the plan, listen, the best place you can go is on your face before God and say, Lord, I don't get it. I don't get it. Take time to reflect. And then this, don't demand an answer. Don't demand an answer. As far as we know, Mary and Joseph took Jesus and what other kids they had at that time. They went back to faithfully serving God. And we don't know if any other explanation came to Mary, except for 18 years later, when her son is 30 now, the ministry starts to take place. That's a long time to wait. It's a long time to wait. But whenever you come to God and say, Lord, I don't understand, it's okay to do that. It's just not okay to demand an answer. It's not okay to say, God, you better explain yourself. He's God. He doesn't have to. A little while ago, I was reading through Job in my Bible reading. And listen, we have the amazing perspective of knowing what was going on behind the scenes. We see chapter number 1. We see how Satan came to God and said, hey, you think Job loves you? Take away everything that he has. And what was going on was this whole dialogue of God showing that, hey, listen, I'm at work in Job in ways you don't understand. But Job didn't know that. Job, as far as he knew, he lost everything he had. He lost his kids. And then, at the lowest point of his life, God took away his health. And in the middle of all of that, his friends come and said, Job, you must have sinned big time. Big time. You think there wasn't some confusion? You think there wasn't some sitting back in Job of what is going on? And as far as we know, God didn't explain himself to Job. You know what God did do? He said, hey, where were you when I made Leviathan? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the world? You know what God's answer to Job was, hey, Job, I'm God, you're not. Sometimes, Bellevue, you might have to accept that there's stuff going on that God won't necessarily explain. I'm so glad that verse is in there, that they understood not his saying. Why? Because sometimes in the course of growing, in the course of God changing and growing an entity, it may not make sense. It may not make sense. But finally, this. Number 3, the ultimate reason for change is God is at work. God is at work. Really, Luke chapter number 1 through 2, and I've read this my whole life, but it wasn't until sitting down and studying it to preach. You know, it is so evident throughout the entire first chapter and the second chapter. Listen, even though there's a lot of human stuff going on, there's lots of details about Mary and Joseph's life, the underlying principle is that God was at work. Listen, God came to Elizabeth, a woman who was well past being able to have kids, saying, hey, you're going to have a son, and he's going to be a prophet. He's going to prepare the way for the Savior, the Messiah, to come in. Like, mind blown. And then Mary came along, and then God said, hey, listen, you're going to have a son, and it's going to be through me, for with me nothing shall be impossible. God is the one at work here. God is the one that brought Luke chapter number 2 to pass, to where how could Jesus meet all the requirements that were in the Old Testament about these are the details of how the Savior is going to be born? Well, God brought it to pass through the government, through all these different things. God is the one at work. So listen, church, whenever you're following God, whenever you're committed to Him, and by committed, I mean you're committed. You're all in. Whenever change starts to happen, you can trust, hey, God is at work. So you can trust. You can trust. Look at verse number 52. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. You know, as a preacher, I wish I could stand up and explain everything in the Bible, but how do you explain that? Jesus, who was God, grew. Remember this, the theme of growth. This passage is dripping with it. Jesus grew. Okay, Brother AJ, how does that happen? I don't understand, except to know this. Jesus was 100% God and 100% man. Though my brain can't comprehend that, that's what happened. That's what the Bible shows. So as being 100% man, listen, there were certain limitations that he put himself under. He hungered. He thirsted. He got tired. He got weary. All physical things that he subjected himself to. And one of those was he grew. He grew. So I can't explain how. I can't explain the ins and outs and the science of all that. But listen, Jesus, who was committed to the Father's business, grew. And you know what the testimony was? Look at the end of the verse. And in favor with God and man. Everybody saw it. It was evident. People could look at a young 12-year-old boy and show, hey, there's some growth happening. There's some change that is taking place. So if God's the one growing, if God is the one who, as you've committed to Him, is growing you, then you can trust. You can trust. And you know what that will be? A testimony that points back to Him. May not make sense. But you know when this happens? Listen. Whenever you're about the Father's business. About the Father's business. We went back to the very beginning of the message talking about what are the requirements to being alive. Listen, if a church is about the Father's business, if the church is about doing what God put them on this earth to do, listen, there will be growth. All the other things will fall in place as well, but talking just about growth, there will be growth. So, honestly, what this message should be tonight, encouraging. Growth's coming. Get ready for it. But don't demand to understand it. And be ready. Be ready. And stay committed. Father, through the course of my own personal walk with you, I can say 100% that I've not always understood the growth and the changes that you brought into my life, Lord, but I can say this. I've never regretted the changes that came whenever you were in control. When you were in control. Father, I pray that Bellevue Baptist Church, as they continue what they've already started, from the very beginning, Lord, being a church that was about your business and the change that has already come in the process, Lord, there's much more down the road. I pray that they would be a people who are not just knowing that you're going to grow them, but anticipating it, looking forward to it. Father, it's going to be an amazing testimony and an amazing journey. As you've spoken to hearts tonight, I pray that we would respond, that we would come and simply surrender. Lord, whatever you want, you can grow us. We're going to have a moment of invitation. I'm going to pass it off to your pastor as Tati begins playing. And I invite you to respond as the Lord's spoken to your heart.
Go to the Lord in invitation. I can't help but think how the message from Brother Nick this morning relates to Brother AJ's message tonight. And man, I don't know what the Lord has in store for us or for you personally, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with growth. I'm pretty sure. And the message is, just like with Mary, that often doesn't feel good. That often doesn't feel good. But if we're all in, if we're committed to the Lord, if we want to serve Him, and we are grounded in the character of God, that He is good, that He loves us, that He desires and gives us only good gifts, we should have an attitude that says, bring it on. Bring it on. I want to grow in Him. And that might mean some discomfort. That might mean that I have to trust Him through some difficult things. But that we can trust Him to grow us. However the Lord worked, I pray that you would respond. I'm going to pray myself, and I'll come and conclude us. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for just the fact of your character that we see from your word, that you are good and perfect and righteous, and that you care for us, that you desire our growth. Lord, that we know that every good and perfect gift comes from you, and you do not change. And I'm so thankful for that, Lord. I also know, though, our desire for consistency and our desire for answers and a plan. And Lord, I pray that you would help reinforce in us the knowledge of your character. Just as we heard this morning, give us wisdom, Lord, when we come to the trials. I think about Mary and the trial of where her child is. And I really can't imagine for 4 days not knowing. And I think we so often underestimate that, Lord, and the response that she was given. Lord, I pray that you would give us wisdom just in who you are, and that you are at work in our lives. And, Lord, that you would help us, even as we heard this morning, not to be double-minded, to be wholly bought in for you, that our desire would be to move forward, as we heard from Brother AJ tonight. I just... even if that brings things that are a little painful in our lives. Lord, that we would have a desire to see you work through us. And I pray that because of that you would. And we'd get to rejoice and see your hand. Just like as Brother AJ mentioned, as we look back on the 3 years here at Bellevue Baptist Church, we can rejoice and see what you've done. Lord, we want to see more of that in our personal lives, in the life of the church. We want to see that at Emerald City Baptist Church. Lord, we want to see you work. And I pray that you would help us to be willing to allow you to work in our lives and through us. Lord, we thank you. We ask these things in Jesus' name.